Hey everyone, I wanted to just touch on how to create a dynamic image with natural light and backlight. This can be a tricky thing. This is straight out of the camera, and I was trying to preserve the golden sunset that was coming through the trees way down the road. And it can be tricky because if you expose for your subject, you're going to blow your sky out. So for instance, if I took my exposure straight up, you see that the sky goes white really fast. So the flat edit or the flat evaluation station that we talk about in the Lightroom section of this course comes into play here heavily. It's not really possible to get a straight out of the camera image that's going to look exactly like you want it to, or at least have it be as balanced as maybe you'd like it to be without sacrificing some things. This is one of those areas where film cameras may have had an advantage years ago. They had a bigger dynamic range, which means you could get that golden sparkly sunlight, and you could also get your subject in focus and bright enough. It was just kind of this better balance of being able to manage harsher lighting situations. So we just have a little daisy here that was opening up, and as you can see, it's pretty sharp, but I wanted that golden glow. So here we're going to use that flat edit or flat evaluation station to bring this very stretched out histogram more toward the middle. We are going to lower our highlights, which brings the left-hand side in. We are going to open our shadows, which moves the left-hand side over more. And then we just start to kind of wiggle with it until we get it to where we want it to be. I want to see where I want this background. And so I'm lowering exposure to get that to be where I want it to be. There's a lot going on in here, so I'm probably going to crop this in a bit, maybe 8x10. I do a lot of 8x10, 5x7 images as finals, and I might add some extra flare to this one because there is a brighter area here that would be a perfect place to put some fake flare, which you can either make through AI or you can have a light overlay or something like that. But then I want to brighten my subjects. Here is where we can go in and possibly use some of our tools that we've used ad nauseum already, and brighten this up. You don't want to have things start looking really pasted in. If we go too bright with this, it can just be really obnoxious looking. So we want to bring this back and kind of evaluate what is being brightened. Like, I don't necessarily want this bit here brightened. So we're going to have to go in and subtract and probably just use the brush to select it and paint out this area manually so that it doesn't have that appearance of being pasted in. There's also another area right here, same thing. We just want it to feel more natural and not crazy. And with those adjustments, we can maybe brighten these guys up just a tad more. I'm going to go in and subtract with the brush and clean this area up as well, right in here, to make it look a little bit less fake. That's the drawback with backlit images. You're going to have a lot of you're just going to have a lot that you have to deal with. And see here, I overspilled onto the stem. I can't go in here, whoops, didn't want to do rejected, let's do pick, and hit option key and turn this into the opposite. We have to go in and just do add, use the brush, make it smaller, and then add that stem back in. It's very manual in its process. Again, subtract with the brush and go in here and fix anything that's looking amiss. It's just kind of laborious, but I mean, it can be done and it's not difficult, just more, time consuming. And then overall, I can maybe use something like a radial gradient to brighten the foreground. So let's go in and just choose a radial gradient. I'm going to put this over the top of my subject and then just raise the exposure in this area independently. Maybe even go into the global and warm up the whole image, which is going to make the sky pop even more. But using my backslash key, we can see the before and the after. And this just helped to balance our exposure. But again, it required a lot of manual separate adjustments in order to make that happen. Not difficult. It's just, this is part of the reason why I spent so much time editing in years past before I started to use my style of off-camera flash, because this balancing act of shooting backlit just requires extra effort. I love it though. There's something very organic and beautiful and sparkly about it. And so let's see. I wanted to see if I can make a light overlay to go over with this. So I'm going to open up my AI generator here, and we'll just make a light overlay to maybe add some extra sparkle to this. So let me go in and let's just choose backlit light flare on black background. Now, I don't know if it'll do well with this or not. We're just going to see what happens as AI increases its ability to get better and better. Sometimes it's amazing, sometimes not so much. But it's kind of the way of the future. So I may as well embrace it, or be a Luddite and stick my heels in the mud and say I'm not moving with it. But yeah. So here it's generating. Sometimes it does a great job, sometimes it doesn't. The other thing we could do is sparkle bokeh. So let's try to generate that. Pretty vintage bokeh on black background. That's important because you want to tell it that you don't want things that are on, in a scene, because then you're going to have to find it. Well, you're just going to find it not as usable. All right, so we're just about done with the flare. One of these may work fine. We're going to test it out. We have to let it pop in here. Let's see. Not that one, of course. Maybe version 1 right here. We'll upscale that. Now see, I said pretty vintage bokeh on black background, and it's actually adding the bokeh to floral images. So we're going to have to be more specific, I guess, with it, but let's take this one. And I'm just going to, let's see, save image as, and I'm just going to save it to the desktop here, just for ease of use. And we're going to go back to Lightroom and bring this over into Photoshop. Let me continue on and see if they did anything with the bokeh here. So this is what they said for created for bokeh. They added a lot of little flowers and things. So maybe if I said pretty vintage bokeh, I'm just copying and pasting here. Vintage bokeh flare on a black background. We'll see if just adding the word flare makes a difference. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm going to take the desktop image here and just drag it onto my picture and use screen mode to add this. And I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm probably going to use a little bit of Gaussian blur on this. So let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to start to tweak it over here a little bit until it starts to blend in. Okay, so that's working pretty well. And Command T to, oops, I have to Command T to transform it like that. All right, so that adds some ethereal flair to it, and by using the Gaussian blur, that helps. I'm just going to turn this off and on to see if there's a very noticeable line or not. You can always go in with a mask, a big brush. Let's make sure it's a brush though, and not the spot healing tool. Make sure it's a brush, and go in and with a soft brush. So turn it over to take the hardness all the way down, maybe 50%, so it's not 100%, and just kind of go around the edges. To make sure that we don't have any sort of giveaway. Now I can go Command T and I can move this around a little bit. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Just a second. We didn't want to move the mask around. We wanted to move the main thing around. There we go. So I can turn this, maybe have that light hitting right on a little flower there. lower the opacity of it possibly. I don't know. I think I like the opacity full. I don't like the shape of it, but whoops, that was my cat dumping something off the counter. Sorry. Yeah. And I have like a dark area here. I might crop this in further, but yeah, anyway, that's how you can add flare. And so by going into AI, you can generate something very quickly. Let's just generate this number 4 here, which gave me some better bokeh by putting flare into the mix here. So let's save this, save image as. We're just going to go to the desktop and save it. And now I want to go to the desktop and open this first with Photoshop and get some of the colors out. So I'm going to go to adjustments and then hue saturation. Where'd it go? And I'm going to use this little hand tool next to the word master to select some of my colors. And there's greens in here, so I'm going to pull the saturation out. Continue to use this tool. I think there's probably cyans. Use this tool. And yellows, of course, is going to take everything out. So we don't want to mess with the yellows. But pretty much anything that isn't orange, I want to remove. Kind of clicking around to see what colors we have. Greens I've got out. Just so we don't have some stray colors introducing into the mix. I'm going to flatten that. And then I'm going to copy and paste this. So Command A, Command C, Command or Control A, Command or Control C, and then V, Command or Control V is going to paste it. So let's Command or Control V, Command or Control T, which is the transform function. And we're going to go to screen, generally is the best one, and take off the one that we did before and kind of move this around and play with it a little bit. You know, you don't necessarily want to keep it at 100%. You don't necessarily want it to be a big solid line like that. You might want to play with different blend modes. Some of them are going to work better. Overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light. Every blend mode works differently depending on the makeup of your picture. So a blend mode that works with one picture may not work with another one. Generally, screen is what I like to use, but this one obviously needs some serious help. So in this case, we're going to take our brush with black selected and start to soften and remove from this picture. Maybe 100% is going to get me there faster. You can see that over the rest of the picture at the bottom, the line was pretty stiff and apparent, but once we removed it off of there, it was fine. And then we could also go in and blur this. So let's go back to the picture part, not the mask. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and maybe bring that back a little bit. We could blur this out to soften it. So there's option number 2. And we can continue to play with that. I don't want to belabor it, but I just wanted to show how quickly you can jump into an AI program to generate something fresh and new that hasn't ever been used before. Sometimes people use overlays that they purchase, and then when someone else has the same overlay, you're going to see the same bokeh pattern, the same light flare, and this just gives you a lot of variety right off the bat. So pretty boring picture with some little daisies opening, and making it more dramatic by choosing to shoot it backlit into a setting sun and then adding some sparkle flare bokeh.